Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Swans Bigfooty podcast. I'm your host Bonds. Joining me tonight we have Von.
Hey guys.
Swansrule100.
Hello.
And SM.
Hello.
Now we've got a lot to talk about tonight, but we may as well kick it off with a grand final review. Swansrule100, do you want to take us away?
Oh, okay. I was worried you'd pick me first. I thought it was the dullest grand final of the last 12, 13 years. Probably since 99. The worst grand final I've ever watched. It was sloppy standard. It was dull and boring, and I was lucky to stay awake till the end. Hawthorn winning it was enough for me to turn off the TV and not watch the presentation, to be honest. I enjoyed Ballantyne buggering up. That was good, but yeah, I just felt Freo were nervous, kicked it away their opportunities, and Hawthorn pretty much controlled it from there in a low standard game. It didn't really feel like a grand final to me. So maybe I'm just bitter and twisted, but it was boring, dull, crap.
Okay, Von, can I get your views?
I echo pretty much what SR said. I remember the podcast before, SM and I were both saying it's like the worst combination for a grand final out of all of the top four possibilities, and not proven wrong at all. That was so boring. Managed to sit through the first half. Don't remember much of the third half.
There's a third half?
Jeez, you really did have a bit to drink.
That's how exciting it was. Look, it was a pretty, awful game, and I'll be honest, I didn't like either sides as I was going on about the week before, so the result was, I don't know, I still wish it was a draw, but nothing too exciting came out of it. But, yeah.
Okay, SM, can I get your views on the match?
Echoing SR and Von, I guess. Very uninspiring grand final. I thought after Freo kicked themselves out of it in the first quarter, it kind of set the tone for the day, and Hawthorn really never looked threatened. And my only excitement for the day was on the final margin, which was within a point of what I needed, so that was a good end to the game. But when you've got Brian Lake accepting the Norm Smith, you know that it hasn't been a very exciting game because the mids haven't done much to light up the game. And I guess that's what we expected. It was going to be a dour game with Freo involved, and that's what we got.
Okay.
I thought your man, Bonds, Jack Gunston, was a bit unlucky not to win the Norm Smith.
Yeah, I was a bit pissed off about that, but he did manage to get me $100 for first goal kicker, so thank you, Jack. Well done. Apart from that, well, it was a pretty dull grand final. I'd actually almost rather watch 119 again just for laughs. The only real highlights I can think of was basically Fremantle's kicking for goal and Ballantyne. That was shocking. Talk about choking on the biggest stage.
Yeah, I think they were exposed a little bit, Fremantle. I don't know they flogged us the week before, but we weren't fit. But I don't think they were that good this year. And I said that a few weeks ago, and I think I was proven correct.
I think a really important stat to look at is the fact that Hawthorn had 11 players who've played over 150 games versus 6 for Freo. And that experience also obviously includes a lot of finals games for the Hawks players. So I think Freo were very much overwhelmed on the big stage.
The other thing, I thought Gary Rowan's sprint was a little disappointing. I thought he might have taken it up to Dangerfield, but he didn't really come close.
The inside word is that he might not have been taking it too seriously.
Lift your game, Gary.
You've also got to remember that he didn't really have much of a pre-season this year, so he wouldn't have a lot of muscle and raw power in that leg still.
It's 10 seconds of running. Bonds, come on. Just put in Gary, you lazy.
I just wanted to know what happened to Cunningham. Wasn't he supposed to be running in it?
He got the tap on the shoulder from number 16 and told mind his own business, get out of the way. Gary's coming. I thought he'd come at least top 3. Disappointing.
Cunningham probably would have given it a bit better shake. He came runner-up in 2012.
Isn't Cunningham a bit faster than Rowan over long distance?
Over a longer distance, yeah, he would be. Rowan would probably have the quickest acceleration at our club, maybe over 20 metres. Like, if you watch a grand final sprint again, he actually has a pretty good start.
Yeah.
It's just he falls away after about 40, 50 metres.
The entertainment pre-match is lacking a little something. I think maybe it's time to get rid of the sprint and have a marathon or something from the MCG out to Bendigo and back. Or I don't know Melbourne that well, sorry, but just that. And the performers are pretty dull. Hunters
and Collectors at half time were good.
Yeah.
Can I just say, it must have been a pretty uninspiring match if we're going to spend, 10 minutes talking about the pre-game. I think that says it all, doesn't it?
We'll bring the reserves back. That used to be good back in the old days.
One thing.
Was there even a game on? I thought it was just grand final sprint. That's awkward.
Yeah, there's a game on as well. Yeah.
There is.
That was when I felt.
There was one slightly amusing thing to come out of it. Ross Lyon's record in grand finals now.
Yep, it's approaching Collingwood levels. If he ever becomes the Collingwood coach, I think they'd better look out.
Look, he
Not
lost
that
to
there's
Collingwood.
anything
I think it's beating Collingwood levels.
Yeah.
Well, if Freo are going to play the game in their pyjamas, you can't really expect too much. Wear the purple, you puffs.
That was shocking. How does purple... I would love to ask, how do purple shorts clash with brown shorts to begin with?
Yeah.
Brown
And why wear your away strip on grand final day?
I'd be interested to know whether they had their proper purple kit in backup in case they won the game. Because I suspect they would have, surely, to put that on for the photos.
You reckon? Yeah.
Oh, I'd hope so.
Understood.
If you're your first premiership in your history, you'd want to be going... It's like St Kilda. Their only premiership and they're wearing Collingwood jumpers.
I don't know. If my club's jumper was purple, I'd be pretty happy if we were wearing white. Just saying.
Look,
That's what they volunteered.
if I was a Fremantle fan, I would want a similar campaign to bring back the Wings of West Coast and bring back the anchor.
Oh, the purple jumper's alright.
The purple jumper's alright, but the anchor jumper was awesome. I loved it.
The green... That's the green, red and purple one, is it?
Yeah, I
it
feel
was
like that.
fantastic.
It's a mess.
Are you colourblind, Bonds? That's the ugliest jumper in history.
Oh, come on. It was so
I
good
feel
just for
like
a joke.
a 4-year-old vomited on paper. That's what their jumper looked like.
Jeez, that's flattering it a bit.
I just think it was hilarious to watch when they played, and I would have kept it just for lols.
Guys, this is how good the grand final was. Look at what we're talking about.
Okay, we may as well move on to the next subject and talk about the upcoming trade period. Our possible acquisition of Lance Franklin and Nicola. Swansrule 100. Do you want to take us away on this?
On which topic, Bonds? You gave me about 4.
Go for the colour.
Go for the cola.
I dare you.
Yeah, well, we haven't touched cola as a topic on our own podcast yet, and there's a good reason because we're sick of frigging hearing about it. But I've had a gutful, and listening to Richard Collis' speech at the Best and Fairest, where he basically said this club's not putting up with any more of that shit, sort of inspired me, and I think that's where I sit on the whole thing. But you might want to fast forward now because I've got a bit of a rant ahead. But seriously, if we're looking at a few facts for starters, like Hawthorn supporters especially crap on about Cola and their 11 flags in 50 years and we're so bloody fantastic. Well, you can stick that up your ass because apart from the last 2, you had a bloody zone that gave you those flags for all those years, and we don't go back and put asterisks near them, do we? I mean, Carlton, Richmond, Hawthorn, North Melbourne won every VFL flag from 1967 to 83. And is it any coincidence that they had the strongest zones, whereas the 2 weakest clubs with weak zones were Melbourne and South Melbourne, and they won 8 wooden spoons in that time. That's why we ended up a basket case. So they can talk about how great they've been, but they were gifted bloody quality players that other clubs weren't. So if you want to diss our Cola flags, then admit you can't count your bullshit 11 in 50 years crap. Let's look at a few facts why this club's in Sydney for a start. Back in the mid-'80s, the VFL weren't allowed to play on Sundays. That was the VFA's day. And the ratings, it was a tough competition back then between the two, is my understanding. But moving to Sydney allowed them to televise games in Victoria on a Sunday to beat the VFA gate. We were set up there, we weren't set up properly, the players bloody getting maps out to find where the ground was. But we're set up there as pioneers to help save the competition. We created a national competition. And without us, and no presence in Sydney, you wouldn't have the bloody TV rights to save this competition. The club was sold twice, paid the licence fee twice, to go back to the big, rich, wealthy clubs to allow them to buy their players. Hawthorn didn't just find Dunstall in a draft, for instance. They bloody got him from Queensland. They got Platten from South Australia. Carlton got Kernahan. Don't talk shit about Cole if you want to talk about that crap. We lost players to big clubs. We lost the Danaher's. We lost Reece Jones. We lost a few others. We sold the rights to Carey, Longmire, Hurd, those sort of players because we had nothing. without Sydney, you wouldn't have a national TV market. And I think I covered that. And let's face it, the cola is there partly because of a retention allowance. Because, as I said, we lost those players. We lost Shannon Grant. We lost Anthony Rocker. We got number 1 picks. We lost Gasper. They were happy to take those players back to Melbourne. But, we're going to take a player and the bloody hell breaks loose, and we're raping the league and we're using cola. Bullshit. Basically we're allowed to have cola. I think Andrew Island said it. If we don't take any good players and we don't, finish higher than 7th or something, as long as we're doing that, as long as we're not successful, then, yeah, you can have all the cola you want. But the minute you try to take a precious Victorian player away, they kick up a stink. If you want to get rid of cola, how about addressing some of the other disadvantages in the league? I mean, we talk about equalisation, and I saw Jimmy Brayshaw came out whinging about it. Well, North Melbourne have had distribution from the AFL, the second highest amount every year for the last 6 years at least, looking at the annual reports, behind the Bulldogs. So are we going to equalise the distribution from the AFL? Are we going to equalise the travel? Hawthorn this year had 14 games in Melbourne, 4 games at Aurora, so only 4 away games effectively. Are we going to equalise that? Are we going to equalise Anzac Day, the Queen's birthday, and those sort of big TV exposures? Yeah, there's not just the issue of the gate there. There's also the issue of the exposure for your sponsors. You're telling me people don't want to sponsor Collingwood and get on the big stage on Anzac Day compared to sponsoring North Melbourne or the Giants? There's that equalisation. The TV exposure. How often are teams on Fox compared to normal TV, and the exposure compared to that? And the outside opportunities. Travis Cloak and Dale Thomas don't appear on TV and radio for the fun of it. They're paid for that. Our players don't get that opportunity. And whether we like it or not, we want to talk facts. Yeah, okay, a cup of coffee's the same price in Sydney, I'm sure, but whether they like it or not, Sydney's consistently rated one of the dearest places to live, and there's a bloody reason the cola's there. And just because it's working doesn't mean it's wrong. I think I'm done, because that's just bullshit, and you can stick it up your ass if you don't like it, because I'm sick of people changing the way it works, not listening to how it works, how it's distributed amongst about 37 players on the list. And then this other shit that starts on the Hawthorn board about us paying ambassadors. What a load of crap. Every club has ambassadors, including Nick Natanui, Luke Montaigne's an ambassador, Harry O'Brien. They found a website that said Kieran Jack and Adam Goods are New South Wales footy ambassadors, which my understanding is not even a paid role. So get over it. You lost in 2012, you bit of dickhead. So stick it up your ass. And we'll take Buddy Franklin just to shove it right up here.
Okay. Just
Gonna definitely have to get the detail for that
Wow.
one. Can I just play devil's advocate here for 1 second whilst SR's all fired up? The Swans fans come out quite passionately and say that the cola can't be used as a slush fund, as a recruitment fund. But I'd ask you this, in this hypothetical situation where a player's going to earn $1,000, a game, whatever, playing for, say, a Richmond, and we're going to offer them the same amount of money to come up here. 9.8% of that is taken up by the cola. If we're saying to them, we're going to write you a $1,000 check, here you go, and Richmond's going to say the same, 9.8% of that check does not have to come from us, because we can say to him, we'll pay you whatever it is, $920 or whatever it is, the AFL will cover the rest. That means that money that we've saved can then be put into a fund to buy a player. And I think that's where people come from when they say it's a slush fund of sorts. And I understand the counter-argument, but I just think that's something that we, as Swans fans, do have to be aware of, that sort of element of it does have to be taken into account when we consider. I completely agree that the opportunities up in Sydney from a marketing point of view are much lower, and you could argue that it's there for that. But arguing against the point that we can then use the money that we save as a slush fund, I think is perhaps not the strongest case. I don't know. I could be wrong.
The thing with that hypothetical, if I can answer, so that player gets $1,000. So Sydney and Richmond would write the player the same contract for $1,000 and lodge that contract with the AFL. $1,000 would actually come from the Swans, and then the Swans are given 9.8% of the salary cap to distribute amongst the players. So theoretically, if we're using it as we say we are, that player with the $1,000 for Sydney actually then gets another $98 on top of his $1,000 that Richmond don't have.
My point would be that the Swans could write him a contract for whatever it is, so $920, and then wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the player, don't worry, mate, the extra $90 coming your way from the AFL. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I guess the problem is with the name of the allowance. Like, should it be addressing the cost of living, or is it really a retention allowance, which is the one we lost?
I think that's a better point to make. I
Yeah.
think that's where people get caught up. Is it shouldn't be labelled a cost of living allowance. It should be a retention allowance.
The other thing I do want to raise as well, any player manager in the AFL worth their salt will demand the same pay and ask for the COLA as a separate payment in the view of what's happened now, where it could basically be removed in the next year or two.
I think the thing that gets lost on people is that the contracts have to be lodged with the AFL. So we have to lodge our salary cap like any other club, and the COLA is actually reported in the annual reports as an extra addition the AFL give us and the one problem I do concede that other people have, and I agree is right, that it's given to us to distribute amongst the players. My understanding is there's actually no controls on that. Like, we could actually go to Kurt Tippett, here's 9.8% of our salary cap just to you. So we have to take the club at face value that they are distributing amongst, I think Andrew Island said 37 players during the week, that equally or however he does it. So I think there's a lack of transparency there, which does create problems when you are trying to defend it, because you face that roadblock that it's not clear-cut the way the AFL set it out, and I think it could be administered better. I think it could be labelled better, and I do agree that there's some argument for, does Kurt Tippett need 9.8% of when he's making the mega bucks? Probably not. But are we guarding against Kurt Tippett going to play for a Victorian club earning the same amount where his money is potentially worth more? And is it important to keep the side in New South Wales thriving for the benefit of the competition? So I guess what I was trying to highlight was that there is some element of, okay, to make the national competition work and address an inequality, there needs to be some extra payment to Sydney that they claim needs to be there. I don't live in Sydney, so I don't know if it's true, but I believe the club when it says it needs it, or rightly or wrongly, and I just get sick of it almost being seen as us cheating or diminishing our success by having a COLA when there's plenty of other crap in the league that, that's just as bad. That's my problem with it.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry, go
the
on.
way I feel about COLA is that it's kind of like, I don't really like what it stands for. Like, I understand why it's there, but there's just, like you guys have touched on, there's just so much, like, grey area with how you actually administer it. I'll put it this way. If another club, under the same circumstances, won a flag, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't call them cheats or anything, but I would I'd feel a bit like I want to know more. Like, I want to know why they have that, because I know Sydney's quite an expensive place to live, but so is Perth. And also, I just think that if you're earning $300,000 a year, you're obviously not going to struggle with the cost of living in Sydney. I'm not against the COLA. I'm just against the COLA in its current form. I think it should be adjusted so that a large portion of it, or a reduced amount, so not 9.8%, a reduced amount gets distributed amongst, like, the rookie players who are on, 40, 70, I don't know what the figures are. But, it's just, I don't like Bigfooty logic. There's apparently this idea that somehow, because of COLA, we had this cashed up bag to throw at Kurt Tippett, and now apparently we've got another bag to throw at Franklin, and it's kind of like, well, didn't you guys just spend last season accusing us of using our COLA on Tippett, and now you're accusing us of using that bag on Franklin? And it's just kind of like, well, did we suddenly get 9.8 times 2?
That's what they want to know. That's where the confusion comes from.
But a key point there is that when we got Tippett, when we got Franklin, well, we won the grand final before we did either of those things. So that's not why we won the grand final.
Yeah, it's weird. It's bizarre that before the grand final, you see the Hawks fans all going on about how our list is so average and overrated. And then, in the days after the grand final, suddenly they're on the mega bucks, and it's all because of COLA that we won.
I think you touched on 3 key points there, Bond. Like, you said if someone won a grand final with a salary cap advantage or something, you want to know more or be a little suspicious. I think that's a key point. We won a grand final. Suddenly people care. Go back to before 2012 Premiership and find as many threads on COLA as there are now on Bigfooty. So that's number one. Like, people, when you're winning, it's a problem. When it's just there helping clubs survive and helping the national competition, it's not an issue to everyone else. I know a few people might have had an issue, but, when Brisbane won their 3 flags, their retention allowance was suddenly an issue where it wasn't in 98 when they were average. The comparison of money, I think you touched on as well. if you're earning 300,000 in Sydney compared to 300,000 at Richmond, do you need a cola? Probably not. But then what if it does mean someone goes, well, I can play in Richmond and the same amount of money and be better off because things are a little cheaper? Do we have to guard against that? I don't know the answer. And the other confusing point is it's not 9.8% of everyone's contract. It's 9.8% of the salary cap. So that doesn't mean Tippett got 9.8% of 900 grand. He just gets a share of that amount of money, which they claim is equally distributed amongst 37 players, he said. So my
Are you
understanding
sure it's equally distributed? Because when I actually did research...
I don't know, because I'm only going on what Andrew Ireland said on the interview the other day. That's the other problem with transparency. It's just...
It seems to change all the time. That's
the way I read it, I think it was from our chairman or something, and it was it's 9.8% applied on top. When I actually sat down and did the maths, so you have 9.8% of the salary cap, which was 90,000 or something like that. I can't remember. I'm just making up figures. If you evenly distribute that amongst 37 people, it's just too big a discrepancy. Say if you were on a 70k salary and then they gave you a exact equal 9.8%, it's just too large a figure. I think per person it was about an extra 20,000k, which is a fair bit. So I don't actually think they give 20k to each person. I think it is 9.8% on top of their contract, because even 9.8% on their contract, all up as a collective, is still 9.8% of the cap. But I'm not really sure. Like you say, different reports and different articles say different things.
I think what we all seem to be agreeing on is that it should basically, as a cost of living allowance, it should be applied to the players on the lower end of the contract, so under, say, 150,000, but that the players over that, it should be applied as almost a retention amount, because quite rightly, those players would be able to make marketing opportunities and television appearances and so on in Victoria and South Australia and Western Australia that they wouldn't at the Swans. So I think it's still a relevant allowance for all players on the list, but I think its naming and its labelling and the way it's applied needs to be clarified, needs to be made more transparent, and just needs to be cleared up, I think, to everyone.
I agree with that, SM, actually. I also believe if it is going to be made almost... I don't know what you name that, but if it's used for those purposes, then players from Brisbane and Gold Coast as well should get a similar allowance.
Yeah, just to increase the ASA for the clubs in rugby states. More marketing in it.
Well, that's it, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yep. Personally, what I'd like done to the collar, I'd have to agree to a similar method to what Bond suggested, which would be any player earning maybe under 120 grand or something will get a certain amount added onto their contract to help them safely live in Sydney. The other thing that came out recently, I think it was 80% or 82% of the Swans list is currently renting, which is pretty high for most AFL clubs. I would have assumed that most players would have bought a house by now.
And how many are living together? You see on Twitter and stuff, the roommates, half of them, at the lower end.
Well, that's people were suggesting that Josh Kennedy could use his cost of living allowance to go off and buy an investment property. And it's kind of well, I don't even think he owns a house, let alone can buy a second one.
Well, I saw on Twitter, Goodsy bought a new place, and, you expect him to be one of the flashier players in the league, I guess, and it was like a little flat. It was nothing special.
And he's got a
sponsorship
sponsorship with Powerade and everything as well.
Star, who cares where he lives, but technically he could have moved back to Melbourne and probably lived in a nicer house. That's something to consider. And
and also with Goodsy buying a new house before everyone gets all narky about it from other reports, he's got sponsorships with both Cadbury and Powerade. And he's one of the very few players on the Swans list that actually has external sponsorship that I can think of.
But again, I'm not even against abolishing COLA and having the same salary cap. Just don't come at me with this bullshit that it's the one inequality of the AFL that's allowing one club this great leg up when there's plenty of other disadvantages, and there's a reason why it came into being. Whether it's outdated, fine, review it like anything in the AFL, but don't talk shit like it's the only problem that exists.
I think what... Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I think what we should do is we obviously should just take 9.8% of Hawthorn's salary cap and just give it to us. Just
Yeah, I
smooth
think
them over.
that's the important outcome from this. I think is Hawthorn should just distribute their salary cap around, or even just to the other Melbourne clubs if they think the other Melbourne clubs are suffering so much. Why don't the Hawks and Collingwood offer to give more of their salary cap to the struggling clubs, or cut?
Or
their
if they
footy
like
departments?
Franklin so much, just pay for Franklin for us.
On a serious note here, I do actually want to point out a recent post by Tuco on the future of the salary cap and the COLA, a thread on the Sydney board where he actually put in a graph of the expenses between cities like Sydney and London, New York, or Tokyo, and Sydney are right up there as the most expensive, which is ridiculous. And I want to actually applaud Tuco for going to that much effort. I think that's possibly the best post we've had on the COLA on our board by far. And any opposition supporters listening to this podcast, go onto that thread, onto page 2 and post 32 and read it, because it is actually very informative and you might actually learn something about the cost of living in Sydney.
I mean, I would implore any rational, sane Swans member in Victoria to head on down to Waverley or the Ricoh Centre or whatever it's called and break in and grab Hawthorn's 11 premiership cups and take them out to the middle of Waverley and take a big turd in all of them. They can go and get stuffed, the Hawthorn supporters. They're a bloody disgrace. Pretty much all of them.
Pretty much all. I mean, there are some nice.
There
ones.
are
Shout out
some
to Messenger.
nice, but
Yeah, okay. But that's 1 in 10 probably. They're all right, but the rest of them go and suck a fat one. Seriously.
okay. Fair enough. We'll move on from the COLA talk now, I reckon, and I just want to ask everyone. We may as well talk about the serious topic that's brought up the COLA talk again. What do we think about the acquisition of Tippett? Oh, not Tippett, Franklin.
Keep doing that.
I know, I'm going to keep saying it.
2013.
Well, 2012 was a pretty good year. Anyways, SM, give us your views on Franklin.
Oh, look, I mean, if anyone listened to the Main Board podcast, they would have already heard a little bit of what I think about this. When it first came up as a suggestion that we could get Franklin, I just thought it was ludicrous because of his stature in the game and his cost to us. And when it came out that we were making a bid, I got actually pretty excited for a little while. But when I heard the amount of money we were offering him and the length of the deal, I just couldn't believe that the Swans, a club that's always been so well run and prides itself on being so well run in regards to deals with players, could offer a player who is 26, I think turning 27 next year, a 9-year deal that would have him playing until he's 36. He breezed it off by saying, if Johnny plays me out of the goal square, I'll play until I'm 36. But come on, get real. You have to be an absolute freak of nature to last that long at his size. And I think GWS took a pot shot at that when they re-signed their mascot for 9 years. And he said, everyone knows that blokes my size don't last very long. I mean, that's it, really. I mean, Franklin is not going to last until 36. And if anyone thinks that he will, they're deluding themselves. I think in the short term, over the next 2 or 3 years, he'll have a great impact on the team, and there's no doubt about that. He'll most likely win us a premiership or 2, but you can't sacrifice your long-term future and sustainability for short-term success. And I'm so happy that the AFL are taking a look at the deal and making sure that we aren't shooting ourselves in the foot, because any well-run business knows that you can't sacrifice your long-term viability for short-term profits or short-term gains, and that's exactly what we seem to be doing. And people just need to take their blinkers off.
One thing, actually, as an argument towards that, SM, premierships are so hard to go by. I would very happily sacrifice. Like, look, we won.
When was the last time we won a premiership, Bonds? You were just talking about 2012. What happened in 2012?
I know, I'm just saying this now. Look, 2012 we had a great year, but we had a lot of luck with injury and everything.
We're not a St Kilda. We don't have to go out destroying our future as a club to win a premiership.
But what I don't understand is why you think we're necessarily destroying our our future.
Because
I don't think that's fair, because none of us know actually the financial situation. None of us know how front loaded or back ended the contract is. for me, I almost feel like it's kind of good that the contract is such a long time because of how it can be spread out to minimise the effect on the salary cap. Whereas if it was just a 3-year
But what we do know
bundle,
as a fact, and what we do know as a fact, and what the AFL has come out and said, is if Franklin walks away or retires after 5 years, he gets a $4 million payout. That's what we know as a fact, and that's what I can't fathom.
but why? Like, I almost feel like we don't know the whole story. Like, how do we not know he doesn't have some assistant coaching role? Like,
Because
kind of
you can't
part of
do that.
his agreement.
Because you can't do that.
do
So it has to be paid in the salary cap.
If we did that, it's illegal. The
Yeah.
AFL would crack down. I'm a bit like, if you want to sign Franklin for a 5-year deal for $1.1 million a year, I'd be like, tick.
Yeah.
I don't like Franklin much, and I might grow to like him. But as you probably gathered, I hate Hawthorn, and he epitomises Hawthorn
Oh, really?
to me. So I'm not a Hawthorn fan.
Not a Hawthorn fan?
No, they trouble me.
Okay.
But hey, if they can fit him into the cap for $1.1 million a year for the next few years, go out and get him, great. But 9 years is a concern to me. Now, his manager said on Trade Radio, if he walks away, he doesn't get the money. But I don't see how that works because my understanding was that you can't do that.
With the rules in the AFL, I've actually done a bit of research on this. Sydney don't have to pay him personally if he walks away from the contract. Unfortunately for us, if he walks away from the contract because the contract was lodged with the AFL, his payments, even if they don't happen, still get lodged in our salary cap.
Yeah, so as SM says, he retires year 5 or whatever.
We can hypothetically,
$4 million in 1 year.
if he does retire, we can do what has happened with previous players and keep him on our list, a la Brisbane and Michael Voss.
And then we've got a black hole chewing up a spot on our list for the next 4 years.
Keep him on the list for 4 years to pay him out.
That is correct. We may have to do something like that.
It'd be like the Michael Voss who is commentating for Channel 10 whilst he's still on the Brisbane list.
And he's the highest paid player. It's stupid.
Look, I will. The other things we've got to look at is the contract is middle-ended. So if he retires after year 5 or 6, years 7, 8, and 9 he isn't getting paid as much. We know that much for.
Well, we don't.
It's been speculated. There's been a number of different speculations on the format of the contract. I've heard that it's a big first year and then flat in the middle, then big at the end. I've heard that it's small for the first few years, then big in the middle. We don't, like Von's saying, we don't know the specifics. All I know is a fact is what the AFL has come out and said. Just said if he retires after 5 years, we have to pay out $4 million.
We know for the first few years.
$10 million over 9 years. You can back end it, you can front it, you can middle end it. The smallest year isn't going to be that small. Let's face facts. If he retires with 3 years to go, even if it's heavily front-ended, I'm sure he's still on 600,000 at least. There's 600,000 a year you can't spend on another player, and another spot on the list you can't use. And you can talk about the other 38 players you have on your list might be good, and you can pay them all right, but it's costing us the potential to win in the future. And my concern actually is probably more about when some of these other players come out of contract and our ability to re-sign them. Given we've seen how easy it is to get free agents, people are going to come for us now. They're not going to hold back. And, you got a Hanbury, Parker, those sort of guys in the future might come out of contract, want a bit more cash and walk. And
to be honest, I reckon Hanbury's going to go. From his comments, last time he re-signed his contract, he's one of the big ones that I actually think will walk from the club. I think he's achieved a lot at the club and will look to go back to Victoria. I'll actually try and...
And we don't have the extra money to offer him because we're paying it all to one guy potentially on the bench. That's my worry. If someone could guarantee to me that what Liam Pickering said, that Franklin walked away somehow and there's some loophole in the contract or whatever we haven't considered and we don't have to pay him if he retires or something, then fine, I'm happy with it. But then why doesn't everyone offer a 9-year deal to star players or a 10-year deal? Just sign them up and retire them when they're useless.
The other thing is, I think there may actually be a loophole in this. I mean, look at how long now the AFL have been looking at this contract offer and haven't given it the final tick of approval.
So isn't that a concern?
I think it could be a concern for the viability of the offer, yes. But if they wouldn't be looking at it for this long if there wasn't a clause in there. If it was as straightforward as Pickering said it was, with no third-party arrangements and nothing like that, it would have probably already been ratified by the AFL.
Really?
I think it personally would have. They would have said we're shooting ourselves.
But it wasn't lodged till 3 o'clock on Friday. Really, they had 2 hours to look at it. I don't think they come in on a Saturday, do they?
No.
With the free agency period, isn't it a 3-day... it isn't 3 business days, it's 3 days from the moment the offer
I guess, but it's
is
similar to the
lodged.
transparency you're talking about with Cola. We don't know who's got what paperwork and who looks at what, or if there's a genuine delay, or it's just that
And
someone hasn't genuinely looked at it yet. Well,
Look,
it's guesswork.
you'd be saying that someone, because of how big the offer is and how controversial it is, especially in the media, someone in the AFL house would have had to have been... They would have been looking over the contract over the weekend. Probably Demetrio himself.
Maybe. I guess if they come out and don't approve it, that won't be the end of the world for me. But I'll be actually a little bit annoyed we lost Mumford in all of it as collateral damage for nothing.
I think Mumford was always going to go, though.
Yeah, I think Mumford was
go
always
either
going to go. We weren't going to give him 4 years.
Yeah.
What,
But
3
what I
years?
can
I
understand
mean.
is that he wanted 4 years and then walked for 3.
Yeah, but look at the pay packet he's got. Apparently,
That's my point. So he's actually moving for the money.
it looks like he's moving for 600,000 a year or something. Apparently, at GWS, and I don't think we would have offered that much even if we weren't getting Buddy. I think we probably would have offered him 400, 450.
The other interesting point, and I think SM raised it on the boards, and I agree with it at the time, was if Buddy said, hey, I want to go to Sydney, supposedly in 2012 when he did, why do we have to offer him 9 years if he's so keen to play for us? Surely we have a bit more power. Is it just to spread the cap out, or... I don't know.
It could be to spread the cap out. It also could be to scare Hawthorn off the offer.
I guess.
Like,
I guess the thing in the back of my head that makes me not mind the deal is that right now I have faith the Swans know what they're doing. I do question it, and I understand where SM's coming from with his concerns. It doesn't make good business sense on the face value of it, but if they say they've run the numbers, they've got it worked out, then they've done enough over the last 12 years to earn my trust as a fan. But I just hope it doesn't come, 8-9 years' time and we're sitting here going, why the hell did we sign that deal? Look where we are now. I'd be very disappointed if that happens.
If it got us 1 or 2 flags, I think it'd almost be a win. I would accept
think
that.
it'd be worth it. Flags are so hard to come by.
Exactly. Look how long we had to wait.
No, we
1933 to 05.
Yeah, but they're so hard to come by, and if we can get one in the next year, I think any club in the AFL would take that.
No,
Like,
But does Lance Franklin give us a flag?
But
Is he the right player?
But he obviously improves us. Like, there's no doubting that.
Does he?
Anything that's... Well, yeah, he's going to take the best defender, and Tippett's going to get the second best defender.
And then
So
Goods will get the
But
third.
Tippett doesn't play as well with the second key forward. We know that from his time at Adelaide. So you're actually trading in a Buddy, and you're getting less impact from Tippett, and you're getting Buddy who
The
actually
the
doesn't...
But if
difference
you just
is-
forget how he works with our structure, it's Buddy Franklin. How does he not go into a team and improve it?
And the
Like,
other
you
thing you got to
Because
look
Hawthorn
at,
is the highest score without Franklin.
and SM, you got to look at one other thing here.
That's
Look
the
at
stats.
what's the difference between Taylor Walker and Franklin. When Taylor Walker was at Adelaide, he was when he's still at Adelaide, he plays out of the square, and they played Tippett higher up the ground. We're going to be keeping Tippett in the square as a one-on-one marking option and using Franklin up the ground. I think
You're forgetting that Tippett's going to have to ruck. We just lost our second ruckman.
that's fine. With the interchange cap next year, it's almost worth it. We couldn't have played 2 ruckmen in all these talls anyway.
Okay, so we're still going to get a lower impact out of Tippett. He's not going to kick as many goals if he's also a bit part ruckman.
Yeah, but then we throw
But he was
Pike
going
up
to be a
full
bit
forward
part
anyway.
ruckman anyway.
It
Buddy
was
or
going to
not.
be no matter what. With this new
No, because
interchange
without
cap,
Buddy,
it's
we could have
changed
gone
the
out and got a
AFL.
ruckman.
Or a defender.
Or a
Are we
defender,
trying to
so indeed.
Are we trying to improve our key defence by recruiting every forward they have to play on, and just then they're only left to play on rubbish?
I think where I disagree with you guys is I have complete faith that the club know what they're trading for and that they have complete control of their financial situation to not be foolish enough to compromise their long-term future.
Exactly.
So I know that's the one saving grace in the back of my head. That I do have that faith, but I honestly fluctuate back and forth. There's an element of like, hey, we got Buddy Franklin, that's exciting, and then there's that trepidation of year 7, 8, 9 that SM expressed. That and I share that concern. And then there's just the question of, I don't necessarily think Buddy Franklin guarantees these 2 premierships in the next 5 or 6 years that make it worth it. He better. And then, maybe it is worth it. But
if we get one more and Franklin plays a starring role for us in the season, the whole 9 years is a success for me. There are 18 clubs now, and in 4 or 5 years, the premierships are probably going to be a monopoly between GWS or Gold Coast anyway.
Think about, we won a premiership a year ago, and this year everyone still laments injuries and opportunities. We're killing our depth more by taking up the salary cap with 2 players. And potentially a player who's not even going to be able to play when he's contracted to the list.
Yeah, but we've still got majority of our
2015, 2017 flag, but 2020 you're going to think, well, geez, we're shit now, and the crowds will drop off. We're playing in a fickle market. We've talked about the need for a retention allowance, and we're going to mortgage our future potentially on one player who's 27.
But if you're going to go as far as 2020. You don't know what is going to be happening in that time. You don't know that.
And the other thing we've got to look at is the salary
player.
And the salary cap.
So far in the future to say that.
Exactly, we don't know what's going to happen. So why have we contracted a player to play then?
Exactly.
He might be.
Because I think aside from on field, we need someone to replace Goods off field. He is the most marketable person in the AFL. I'm pretty sure I read.
Yeah, but not when he's 36 and can't play.
Goods is 34 at the moment and still can.
No, name me one key forward, Von or Bonds, who's played past 34 and been any good.
I'm not saying in the future. I'm saying right now, Goods is going to retire in the year or the next year, and you need someone to draw the crowds in. You need someone.
I agree.
This is my exact point, though. You and Bonds are both saying, if we win a premiership in the next year or two, if he's a marketing genius in the next year or two, it's all a success. But it's not. You have to look 9 years down the track. You're saying there's no point looking in the future, but we will have Franklin on our list in 9 years' time. And that's simply the fact. It's one person, and we're paying him a huge load of money to be on our list.
But it's not going to be that much in the grand scheme of things 9 years from now, because we don't even know what our list is going to be like.
That, and you've also got
But if you run your business like that and say, okay, the next 3 years we'll just blow all this money because in 6 years we don't know what's going to happen, then in 6 years' time you're not going to be like, we were good for 3 years. It doesn't work like that. He might be marketable now, but he's no use to us not playing in 5 years when we still need a marketable presence.
Okay, what about this? In the next few years, we've got a bunch of young Sydney kids playing Oz Kick and that. They're going to fall in love with Lance Franklin and probably become more of a Swans fan. In fact, it'll probably bring us...
Rubbish.
You don't reckon Franklin will give us a bigger supporter
Brandon
base?
Jack. They're going to fall in love with Lewis Jetta. There's plenty of players on our list who are going to motivate.
Yes, look, these players are fantastic. Lewis Jetta has been brilliant for his marketability in Sydney, but there's still no Lance Franklin when it comes to marketability.
No one in Sydney knows who Lance Franklin is. I was speaking to someone
I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that.
Okay, I've spoken to a number of casual AFL fans, which are the ones that you're looking at here in terms of using Franklin's marketability. The casual AFL fans who are going to draw them into the game, they don't know who Buddy is.
Did they know who Barry Hall was when we recruited him?
Who follow NRL, and they know Buddy, and they've been asking me about it in the last few days.
I know people who claim that they're Swans fans and watch Swans games who say, "Who's Lance Franklin?"
Okay, what about...
Obviously, they're not really fans.
Franklin
but that's
has
the
got
people that
enough.
you're looking out for. People know who Gary Aberdeen is. They know who Adam Goods is. They know who Barry Hall is.
Hey, SM.
I have a lot of friends. Yeah.
I've got a few questions for you then.
Okay.
One, do you believe most fans in Sydney would have known who Barry Hall was when we recruited him?
Not when we recruited him, no.
And do you believe more fans in Sydney back, let's say as a comparison, fans in Sydney in 2002 when we recruited Hall and now when we recruited Franklin, would they have known Barry Hall better beforehand or Franklin?
Franklin. But
Now
Hall
the other
was
thing
recruited
is,
as
has
marketing-
Franklin, yes or no, has Franklin kicked the NRL off the back page of the Sydney newspapers this week?
I don't read the Sydney newspapers because they're usually trash,
Yes.
but I think that's true, yes.
So it's obvious people know who he is because they're making a fairly big deal about it.
But I'm a bit different to SM, and I don't deny that he does that now. But you talk about Paul, you talk about Tony Lockett before that, you talk about Goods' marketability. They've been there and done that, and then we're still back in this. we're always back in a similar position. So Buddy gives us 3 or 4, 5 good years, say, of good marketing where he's the number one draw card in the AFL. He brings an average crowd of 30,000. He might win us 2 flags. Does that have lasting appeal in the Sydney market? And the evidence so far with these other big names says that it doesn't always work. Barry Hall might have drawn fans in for a while, but then he leaves and we're still looking for the next marketable guy. But we're not going to be able to get the next marketable guy because we're paying $1 million to a 35-year-old who doesn't play.
Yeah, it was a bit sad to see. There's an article where it was some marketing advisor who was saying, we had Warwick Capper in the 80s, we had Lockett in the 90s, we had Hall in the 2000s. And you look at that and you say, geez, we do the same thing every decade and look where it's got us. We're no better off, essentially, because of them than we were before.
So
Bonds and Von are right. It works, and it works in the short term.
In the short term, yes.
And it gets us fans.
For 9 years,
it gets us fans.
Great.
I was raised in.
But then you can't replace him. Say in 6 years' time he retires. You cannot afford to replace him with the next marketable guy that you supposedly need because you're spending so much money on one player and he's too old to play.
But you don't know if they can or can't spend that money. That's why I'm saying we have to have some faith that the Sydney Football Club know what they are doing financially. And
why should we have faith? Faith is an absence of evidence. Why should we have faith? We should always be challenging
because of precedent. Just based off precedent.
Has Collis ever really made a bad decision since he's been at the Swans? Bradshaw, okay.
So we were still paying off his contract up until 2012.
But do you think it cost us anything?
Yeah, it cost us money in our salary cap.
But did we not win a flag like a few years later?
But my point is that you're saying where's the precedent for them stuffing up on a key forward, costing us a large sum of money, and I'm pointing at Bradshaw. It happens.
It happens, exactly. But the other things we've got to look at, the salary cap will be increasing over the next 9 years. So Franklin's contract won't be as weighty in 9 years' time.
Can I ask you a question, Sam?
Yeah, go for it.
You got a couple for me? Okay, so if Pike goes down, who's our main ruckman?
Tippett, and we'll probably be recruiting a mature age recruit from the Waffle or the VFL.
Probably, but that's guesswork. If Richards goes down, who's our main defender?
Grundy, LRT,
okay.
and Reid will be probably
LRT,
moving
who hasn't played in basically a year.
We'll probably be moving back.
My point is that we've gone out and got a key forward when we already have Tippett. We already have a developing key forward in Reid. We already have one who's playing quite well in White, who we could have offered a bigger contract to keep. Instead, we've gone out and got Franklin. Instead of addressing our needs, which was a young key defender and a young developing ruckman who can play as backup to a Mumford or to a Pike. Those are our needs, and we've ignored those needs in favour of going out and getting the second most well-known player in the AFL.
Okay.
Because we think it'll work.
In the next 3 years, are we more likely to win a flag with Tippett on our list, or a player such as Delaney or Brown?
You mean Franklin, sorry, again?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Franklin or a player such as Delaney or Brown?
I'm talking about using the money that we would have thrown at Franklin to instead lure, a Carlisle or another one of those young defenders to the Swans. Or
someone on a 5-year deal, not a 9-year.
Here's the thing. If we're trying to recruit a Carlisle, because, look, Lance Franklin, yes, it's going to cost us a lot in the long run, but we're not trading... And we're losing Mumford and Pike probably due to it, but there's a good chance they would have left anyway. But look at this. If we're going to try and chase a Carlisle, what are Essendon going to ask for a Carlisle? They're going to want pick one at least to start with, so they'll mean us trying to trade some big fish.
If we offer him a contract, as we did with other players in the past, where we put a contract on the table to them and they've actually gone to their club and asked for a trade, yes, it doesn't always happen, but... It is something to consider, or a Natanui. There are players out there who address our needs much more than a Franklin. As you're saying yourself,
they're not free agents. Anyway. We're going to have to trade for an arm and a leg for a Natanui or a Carlisle.
But
we are paying an arm and a leg.
Franklin.
We're paying it an arm and a leg, but we're not trading one. Like, if we try to bring in a Carlisle, Essendon have got to look at our list and at least say we want a Josh Kennedy or a Kieran Jack, your first round pick, and a Parker.
Yeah, so then you wait another year for
sacrifice our long-term future. It's okay to sacrifice our long-term future if it's in cash, but it's not if it's trading away draft picks.
See, I just disagree with the fact you think we're trading away our long-term future. I don't think any of us are in any position to comment on the financial status of the Swans.
Well, what was our profit last year, Bon? Do you know?
No.
It was something like
$600,000
$200,000
profit.
in a premiership year. And before that, we'd made a loss for the last 4 or 5 years. That's our financial future.
And
That's
why
right
do you
there.
reckon we're
That's
trying to
not
get
our
Tippett?
financial future. That's our financial past.
Okay.
And why do you
can
reckon...
trend from that?
Franklin. Why do you reckon we're trying to pick up Franklin then? More marketability. He's going to get us on the front page of the newspapers. He's going to bring in more sponsorship to our club.
But then, is it lasting sponsorship, though? That's the problem. In 6 years' time, it's not
Okay.
there. We've seen it doesn't last.
When
So
I
you're
was
just-
when I was younger, both my parents were obsessed with AFL, and they tried getting me into it, and I really couldn't. Half the reason why I started getting obsessed with it was watching Tony Lockett run around for the Swans as a kid.
Yep.
And I'm sure there were several other fans up in New South Wales that fell in love with Lockett and are still members and fans now. Franklin's
Where
going
are
to
they
have a
all?
similar lasting effect, probably.
Hopefully, he'd want to, because won't be there for the last 3 years of his contract, so he better do a lot for the first 5 or 6.
That's what SR and I are saying. We're not denying that people will sign up for the Swans with Franklin in the short term, but it's towards the end of his contract, which is when he's not going to be doing anything.
What we're
And
going to
we
be
can say
hoping...
we don't know the future finances, we don't know the future salary cap, but we do know that we'll be $1 million shorter of every other club because we're paying someone who more than likely won't play. Who do you two honestly think he'll play the full 9 years?
Most likely not, but you never know. Look at Adam
I don't think he's
Goods.
going to play a full 9 years, but look, if we get 1 or 2 premierships,
Worth
cannot
every
care.
cent.
I got to disagree with that. Like I said, we're not a St Kilda. We haven't. We
we don't have
won
to
2
turn into
flags
a St Kilda. Like, it's not like
to get
getting
that desperate
bloody...
to win a flag. To be that desperate to win a flag, that what we're doing, it's almost as if we're still waiting for our flag from 1933. It's not as it's it's like we've forgotten that we've won 2 flags in the last 8 years.
But what if he doesn't win a flag?
But
What
what
if
if
we
he
don't
does?
win it?
I'm just saying, it's just, like, I really do understand what you guys are saying. It's a huge risk, and I do understand what you're saying about sacrificing long-term stability for short-term success. But for a lot of people, it comes down to a very personal opinion of whether or not you think that's worth it. So, like, obviously, Bonds and I both think that short-term success and a premiership is worth it, and you guys obviously, you have a different view, and I think that's fine. So we just agree to disagree and go on to the best and fairest.
I agree with Bond. Let's move on to a new topic.
What a spontaneous and interesting way to move the topic on there, Bon. Very smooth of you.
It's like I just read off a screen.
Yeah,
It's
give
like
me the credit I deserve, and let me do my job as host.
Go for it, Bonds.
Okay then, well we're moving on to our next topic now, the best and fairest. Thank you.
Oh, the best and fairest, you say? Okay.
Yeah, thank you to our temporary host, Bond. It was a very interesting night of results. I'm not sure. We did have a few people on our board predicting Jared McVeigh would win it, and I'm one of McVeigh's fans, but I honestly thought Jack had it in the bag. But fair enough. It was interesting. It's always great to see how the coaches rate the players.
Yeah.
Year in and year out. And you look at our top 10 in the best and fairest, I'm not sure how many posters on the board would have had Craig Bird in 8th.
Yeah.
Or Luke
that was the one
Parker
that surprised
6th
me.
in the best and fairest. I would have had Mike Pike in the top 10. I had him at 6 or 7. And he hasn't even finished top 10.
Higher than 10th, seeing as he was an All-Australian nomination.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how they value our players and how they rate them compared. Like, Hanbury at 4th would have surprised a lot of people from other boards, but with his consistency this year makes some sense. Kennedy finishing 3rd was probably about right. Yes, he didn't have as brilliant a year as last year, but it was still a great year. And Jack and McVeigh 2-1. McVeigh winning. Well, it surprised me, but it's a very worthy winner, and he's had a brilliant year. SM, what are your views on the best and fairest?
I agree. I think some of the results were pretty surprising. I thought Jack had it in the bag as well. The one I do want to touch on, and I'm sure Von will also love to jump on it, was quite literally, perhaps in her case, was Parker taking out the most improved. I thought it was very deserving, but I was quite surprised actually. I thought someone like a a Pike who's really established himself in the team, perhaps, or even if you want to go down the path of a Rampy, who's come off the rookie list and cemented his spot in the team.
Rampy
So I
got
thought it was-
rising star, so I don't think we could give him most improved. I mean, he wasn't on our list the year beforehand.
Oh, true. But looking from the perspective that where he came from at the start of the year, but I see your point. But no, I thought that was really well. It was deserved by Parker, but it was slightly surprising. Well done to Jared McVeigh on capping off an outstanding year. I'm sure he's going to point and yell just as much next year and get in the face of all our Swans team, and I'm sure Lance Frankton will cop a belting.
Best clubman was a bit of a surprise, Jude Bolton. It was great to see him winning it.
Nostalgic, maybe.
Yeah.
Sentimental?
He won back-to-back Best Clubman awards in 05 and 06, but recently it's been almost a shoo-in for Reece Shaw to get it, and all year we've been hearing about how Reece Shaw has been helping all our players in rehab, what an inspiration he's been for Gary Rowan. Even Gary Rowan I thought was a chance of it this year with how much our players seem to be motivated by his return on the field this year. I just found it a bit surprising. Like, yes, it's a bit of nostalgia and we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, but it was...
Yeah, I mean, I think when we touched on it a few weeks ago, I was really looking to push forward Reece Shaw, because I thought from the sounds of things from guys like Rowan, AJ and other guys who've suffered from long-term injuries, it really sounded like Reece Shaw was an immense presence around the club to really G up the younger guys. So I would have given it to him personally, but you can't really fault Jude getting it, I suppose.
Okay, and the Players Award, Jared McVeigh, so obviously very highly rated by the players again.
Probably scared of him.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. You don't vote for me, I'll give you a screaming behind it in the change rooms.
Yeah.
And I heard the rumour was that Shane Mumford was the best performed on the night.
Yeah, getting
out drunk.
To a standing ovation, apparently.
Did anyone see Jared McVeigh's acceptance award speech?
Yeah, he pointed and shouted it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask if he was pointing and carrying on to anyone. But
I think the other thing to touch on from the night was Richard Collis getting life membership, and his last one as the chairman, and he's done a pretty unparalleled job at the Swans as chairman in his time, and I think he's one of the longest serving chairmen in the whole league, so it'll be sad to see him go.
He's been the most successful. I honestly believe Collis has been the most successful chairman in AFL or VFL history. That's including Eddie Maguire or any AFL CEO you can raise at me. I don't care. The turnaround he has successfully done with the Swans is nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah,
and including his work setting up West Coast as chairman, the inaugural chairman there. So he's been a fantastic football person while he battled his own problems as well off the field. Not that he went on it.
Yeah, no, that was the other one I was going to touch on, is his work with West Coast. I mean, pretty much everywhere he goes, everything he touches turns to gold wherever he goes. So it's good to see, and it's sad to see him go.
Maybe he should rub down Buddy every week so he gets through the 9 years.
That's put a very bad mental image into my head, so thanks for that, SR.
That's all right.
I'm going to dream very happily tonight now.
But I think McVeigh winning was, probably well deserved.
It was very well
Pretty
deserved.
well deserved, yeah.
He had a brilliant year.
Kennedy's top three confirms to me my feeling that Kennedy is still our number one midfielder, despite what other outside people might think. I think he facilitates the play of the other playmakers the most, and he's still number one in my eyes.
The other thing you've also got to look at Jared McVeigh. I think his voting was helped. He got 2 perfect scores this year. The semi-final against Carlton, and I believe it was around 14 or 15 match against GWS. He got 2 perfect scores of 50 points.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's been done in our best and fairest history before. So,
well, if you were voting for it, he would have won by even more, no doubt. But
perfect across the entire season. His majestic bald head was won me over.
Jesse White didn't crack the top 10, so I was a bit of a shock. But
yeah, I honestly thought even though he's leaving, he could have been a great chance of most improved player. Even if he is leaving, I thought he would have
went from completely useless to serviceable. That's pretty good.
Like Parker was already.
And I
in
just saw
our team.
Andreas Everett didn't even turn up. Apparently, bit like half of his games this year.
I think that's just rumour. It's going off a Twitter post that him and a few others were playing beer pong or something. That could have
like
been.
Dean
That
Towers.
could have been after the best and fairest. I'm pretty confident Dre would have turned up.
Based on what?
Oh, the fact that White and Mumford have turned up as well. If Dre and there were a few other players who they said didn't turn up. I can't remember off the top of my head. But if they hadn't turned up, the media would have made more of a fuss about it, I reckon.
I love your logic, like, because it wasn't in the paper it can't have happened, or because the AFL are taking a long time, they're really scrutinising the deal. It must be nice to be you.
I live in a fairy world. I'm not going to lie. It's very happy.
you're
in my
good. You're a good bloke.
head. I just honestly think that if players hadn't turned up to the Swans' best and fairest, even if
No one
they
would give a
weren't
shit,
low
'cause
key,
we don't have a marketable player anymore. We need value.
I just think, like, even if they are low-key players, they would have jumped on it. They would have pretty much jumped on it, especially with players leaving due to Lance Franklin, cracks in our culture. I think the
Yeah.
media would have jumped on top of it. I'm pretty confident they would have turned up.
What
At
else
least
we
that's
got?
my views.
What else have you got?
Okay, well, that's the end of this week's edition of the Swans Big Footy podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.